F is for Family is genuine, yet so unapologetically raw.
Since I'm your father, and I'll put you through that wall.
And it masterfully deals with adult situations and dark themes. It's right up there with Bojack Horseman and Rick and Morty, and despite Bill Burr's usual hilarious vulgarity, the show has some serious heart.
There's no eggs either!
And eat your attitude!
But with such a colorful cast of characters, we ask ourselves, who is the most good, who is downright terrible, and who's the most evil of all? That's what we'll be digging into today. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is F is for Family, Good to Evil. And don't forget, if you don't hit that notification bell, I swear to God, I will put you through a wall.
I almost bled out in Korea, alright? I have met God!
As usual, we'll be breaking characters down into 3 categories: the good, the gray area, and bad to evil. So let's start with the most pure and work our way down. We're giving the gold medal of good to Otto.
Hooray for America!
Otto is a jovial and chipper elder Jewish German man who went through a lot in his younger years. The kids in the neighborhood think he's a war criminal, and that the numbers on his arm seem to indicate all the people that he killed. But in reality, he's a caring, sweet man who hasn't really hurt anyone.
That's how many people he's killed. It's a scoreboard!
In fact, he loves to help people. Otto gives Kevin a ride home in his car, he helps find the Murphy's pet dog, Major, and he managed to drive Sue to the hospital for Maureen's birth when Frank was unavailable to help.
I took your mother to the hospital.
Besides Otto's altruistic nature, he also finds time for love. Otto manages to accidentally hook up with Ginny during the block party.
Well, hey, Silver Fox.
Though he's too nice to break up with her and has a hard time telling her to leave until much later in the series.
So, get the out of my house.
While it seems nice that Otto is having a difficult time breaking the news to Ginny, he also kind of strings her along. And that's not honest. But all in all, Otto is a good guy. The matriarch of the Murphy family, Sue Murphy, gets the silver medal for good.
Your father's gonna have an absolute stroke, and you can clean him with a sponge.
She is the hardworking and caring mother who works at Plastaware.
Take a little nap.
She also suffers from depression and is prone to mental breakdowns. Sue is the one who tries to keep everyone in her family happy and from trying to kill each other, so she gets big points there.
I keep everyone from killing each other!
Really, she's the glue in this family unit. Without her, everything falls apart. Now, sometimes Sue neglects the kids when having shouting matches with her husband and rarely listens to their problems about varying topics like bullies or relationships. However, she deeply cares about Kevin and nags Frank about yelling at him because he's a sensitive child.
Frank, go hit your boxing bag. Kevin, room.
Sue also encourages her daughter Maureen to be the best person she can be and tells her women will be astronauts someday.
Women will be astronauts in the future, sweetie.
She also encourages Maureen's passion for science and tells her she'll be great at it, unlike Frank.
Daddy sometimes says things he doesn't mean.
She also sticks up for the little guy when she found out one of her best friends, Win-Win, was being abused by her husband, Chet Stevenson. She knew she needed to step in and ask her if she needed help. Moving on to Chauncey Rosie Roosevelt.
Your real name is Chauncey?
You tell anybody that, I'll cut you deep.
Rosie is Frank Murphy's best friend, and he works at the airport as a shop steward and baggage handler.
You here to shoot up the place, let me go on break first.
Rosie gets tired of all the crap at the airport, and later in the series, he runs for alderman, mainly because he thinks he can do some good in the city and be a better man.
I know this neighborhood, and I care about it.
Rosie does do some good when helping his best friend Frank when he was at his lowest point. When Frank gets fired from his airport job, he gets desperate to find a new career. Rosie gives him a business card for the company Champagne Chariot Vending Services, and Frank eventually gets back up on his feet, all thanks to Rosie. On that note, we also have Georgia Roosevelt. Georgia is a caring, loving, devoted woman who believes in her husband.
I don't want to hear you complaining anymore.
You won't hear me complaining!
And is a very good person. When we see her playing pool in the bar, she later drives Frank and Rosie home while they're passed out drunk. So way to go for being the responsible designated driver and making sure Frank and Rosie get home safe. In fact, she cares about her husband so much that during breakfast, she convinces Rosie to run for alderman since he's always complaining about the neighborhood and talking about what he would do if he got the chance.
Everybody loves and respects you. You run for alderman.
She believes that her husband will actually do some good for the people in the neighborhood and totally has his back.
You're gonna be great, Chauncey. Mwah.
Next is Anthony. Hey, you know what? You know what? You know what?
You know what? You know what?
Anthony is only 5 years old, and he's an honest and good kid. He's easy to get along with, and he may be hyper sometimes, but big deal. Little kids are hyper all the time. Other than doing stuff to the TV, Anthony does some good on the show too. Not only does he help Philip and Maureen practice for the ring toss for the Hobo Jobo show, he helps the Murphys by telling them where his son ran off to.
Spit it out!
Mommy!
Up next, we have Bill Murphy. Bill Murphy is the ginger middle child of Frank and Sue. He's a foul-mouthed young man who lives with the fear of being harassed by resident bully Jimmy Fitzsimmons and his cronies.
I warned you to stay away from her, Murphy!
Bill and his friend Philip are both wimpy and appear to be social outcasts among their peers. But Bill does not like to be thought of as a wimp and will stand up for himself on occasion with varying degrees of success. Bill's friendship with Philip temporarily becomes strained when Bill becomes a much more rude and rebellious person.
I'll be right back!
He starts to ignore Philip when he starts dating Bridget, and his bromance certainly plummets. Luckily, they made up after Jimmy Fitzsimmons returned from Catholic military school. Speaking of Catholic military school, Bill was the one who sent Jimmy to military school when he framed Jimmy for stealing a hockey stick, when in reality, it was Bill that stole the hockey stick himself.
What's your name?
Jimmy Fitzsimmons.
Bill threw Jimmy under the bus, and yeah, you're probably thinking, but Jimmy sucks, he picks on Bill all the time. And you're probably right, but Bill stealing a hockey stick and blaming Jimmy for it, without owning up to the mistake, was wrong.
Maybe Catholic military school will finally straighten you out.
Despite this, Bill is a good kid at heart, and helps Jimmy out by taking him to the hospital when he was the victim of a hit and run by Bill's boss, Randy.
Oh, man. Not again.
While Bill may have his problems, he tries to do good in the only way that he can. He cares about his sister and looks after her when his parents ask him to. He does love his brother and actually listens to his advice.
Pretend to be asleep. You were never there. I'll be fine.
He's a good friend to Philip, usually, and their loyalty to each other really shines at times. He also calls out the crap that his mom and dad do. Now we get to Philip. Philip is Bill's best friend and the brother of Anthony. Philip seems to be the only one who understands his brother's nonsensical lexicon. They seem to share the same love for Hobo Jojo. That is, until Hobo Jojo cheated Maureen and Philip on stage during the ring toss. When Hobo Jojo kicked the box, making Maureen miss the ring toss, Philip gets really angry and calls him a cheater.
You're gonna die!
Which is a nice act of justice. That said, Philip does have some demons to work out. After all, he has a kill book where he draws all the people he wishes were dead, and he seems to have psychological issues and controls his anger through plucking out his hair and eyebrows through frustration.
This is how I get my feelings out when my ears get hot.
Despite all that, this seems to be something he keeps in check as a defense mechanism. Philip is a good kid for the most part and is a good friend to Bill. He just might need some therapy. Moving on to Father Pat.
By the way, that's 2 Hail Marys for the F word, or you going to hell.
Father Pat is the priest at the local church. Like any other reverend, he's a devout Christian and a man of God. However, it really doesn't help that he's ignorant of Jimmy Fitzsimmons' bullying ways. It looks like Father Pat is enabling his bad behavior out of ignorance. Despite being oblivious towards Jimmy, his good deeds round out his behavior when he runs a retreat for married couples experiencing difficulties.
Clark, you just earned an Honesty Star.
Helping people patch up their love lives is a pretty selfless act.
Next stop, Understandingville.
Up next, we have the owner of the Sawitsky & Sons electronics store, Dick Sawitsky. He first appears in episode 1, where he notices the broken TVs and assumes the order is defective.
Pull the receipts of everyone we sold these to.
He forces his son, Chuck, to apologize to Frank for being such a jerk to him.
Sorry, I raised my voice to you, sir.
He also gives the Murphys a different brand of color TV to make up for it free of charge, allowing Frank to have his fight party with his friends and family. A decent guy and much more honest than his son. Doreen gets a quick mention here too. She's one of the female employees who constantly gets hit on by her boss Chuck Sawitsky, but she knows how to defend herself too by making clever quips back at him. Moving on to Evelyn Goomer. She doesn't know that her husband spends his time spying on the neighbors, including the Murphys.
I look through your window every night, and I've never seen a color TV.
She manages to help Sue out by being part of a focus group for her new invention, the Forcuncula. Evelyn hates the invention and isn't afraid to say it to Sue's face.
It's still not, what's the word? Good.
And you gotta respect the honesty. Sue doesn't need yes men on her side to make a defective product go viral. Next is Ben Schreider. Ben is the owner of a sporting goods store. In the episode Breaking Bill, Bill robs his store for a hockey stick. When he catches Bill and asks what his name is, Bill tells him that his name is Jimmy Fitzsimmons. Philip knocks Ben over with a snowboard, making his prosthetic leg fall off, and Bill and Philip make a run for it, while poor Ben crawls after them, cursing the name Jimmy Fitzsimmons.
I got your name, Fitzsimmons!
Moving on to Marie. Marie is the wife of Babe and the mother of Anthony and Philip. She is shown to be very protective of her sons and is generally a good person.
Are you feeling better after what the TV hobo did to you?
Like Evelyn, she isn't afraid to voice her opinions on Sue's invention, and lets her know that it sucks. Now we have Ginny Throater. Ginny is one of Sue's friends and talks way too much about herself and even her problems.
We hadn't had sex facing each other for 7 years.
She's one of those people who talks at you rather than to you. Ginny also has no idea that her husband is secretly gay and is naive of what's going on.
I cut my hair short, I put on aftershave, but he wouldn't touch me.
The last person we have in the good category is Brandy Dunbarton.
We're drinking brandy, and my name is Brandy.
Brandy is the widow to the late Roger Dunbarton and currently CEO of the airline. Brandy is a bimbo trophy wife stereotype and was treated poorly by her husband.
Don't buy a hot dog, Brandy. You're getting fat.
We see her agree to escort Bill to the bathroom when Frank and Roger were deep in conversation.
I'll take him. Follow me.
She also shows concern for Bill when he comes out of the bathroom looking traumatized, meaning that Brandy has empathy for people. And that wraps up the good characters. We now enter the gray area. First up, we have the patriarch of the Murphy family, Frank Murphy. On the surface, Frank seems like the type of guy who only cares about getting home early so he can watch some TV. But in reality, Frank cares about his family, the people at his job, and he does his best to be a good guy, when you dig past his rough exterior.
You don't know god thing about me.
Frank is often portrayed as the anti-hero, although deep down he tries to do the right thing.
Oh, I only want what's best for you. You gotta be realistic, Kevin.
He even tries to help his friend Rosie through a tough time during the airways strike, and also tries to help Rosie and the other airline employees deal with their new boss, Scoop Dunbarton, in the episode A Girl Named Sue. So why is Frank stuck in the gray area? Well, for starters, if you misbehave or get on his bad side,
I will come right home and I will put you through that wall.
well, he'll threaten to anyway. Frank is a good guy for the most part, but his verbal abuse is out of control.
You're done with school, and we might get a nice folded flag out of it.
He has shouting matches with just about everybody in his family, which is not healthy for any relationship. He yells at Kevin for doing poorly at school, he continues to call Bill weak, and oftentimes disrespects Sue.
Well, the kids are gonna be late for school, and apparently I'm the only one around here who cares.
Frank has no problem stealing money from Sue's secret stash because Bob Pogo starts eating his inventory from his vending job. In middle school, Frank was apparently a bit of a bully as he and his friends would throw weaker kids into the local river, so we know how he feels about weakness and vulnerability. Frank is also shown to be neglectful towards his kids, and his neglect led to an incident where Kevin was drowning in a pool for 2 minutes, while Frank was unaware, even though he was in Frank's care.
2 minutes without oxygen is not ideal. But you gotta understand, toddlers are resilient.
Frank seems to have passed the severe anger issue trait onto Kevin and Bill, which is hindering their experiences and abilities to cope with other people.
Hey, make yourself useful. Go light your brother's cape on fire.
All that said, Frank doesn't really see many of his flaws as flaws, and does his best to do the right thing usually.
I'll be right back. I gotta go feed my prisoner in the dungeon.
Additionally, it's the 70s, and a lot of this behavior was more normalized back then.
Fire in the hole!
Up next is Kevin Murphy. Kevin is Frank's oldest son. He enjoys progressive rock, smoking weed, playing the guitar, and getting in trouble.
You're not the boss of my stomach!
My mouth is!
He's also surprisingly protective of his little brother, Bill Murphy, at times. Kevin protects Bill from bullies, especially Jimmy Fitzsimmons. In fact, in the first episode of the series, Kevin rescues Bill from getting attacked by Jimmy and his cronies.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin had a chance to be more intimate with his girlfriend, but chose to be a good brother instead. When Bill accidentally breaks the family television with a magnet, Kevin bravely takes the fall and admits that he broke the TV.
You did?
Yeah, it was me.
Kevin also defends Bill from Jimmy when Jimmy accuses Bill of lying about his non-involvement in robbing the church. He also attempts to save Bill from drowning in the last episode of the series.
This boat's moving!
We'll pick you up later!
That just goes to show you that family is valuable to Kevin, and he'll do whatever he can to have that special bond with either his siblings or his parents. Kevin has done a lot of good, but he's also done a lot of bad as well. Whenever he hangs out with his friends, he tends to commit acts of vandalism and spray paints graffiti on the side of buildings and trains.
You had the best pizza, and you ruined it!
He was also inspired by his friend to steal beer from a liquor store, but he fails and gets arrested. On top of that, he's quite the slacker and doesn't seem to show respect to others when he should. Despite these transgressions, Kevin does try to be a decent human being. After all, he's only a teenager, and teenagers make mistakes all the time.
First 5 years of my life, I thought my name was The Accident!
Moving on to Maureen Murphy.
I love you, Daddy.
Nah, you don't. Nobody does.
Maureen is the youngest child and daughter of Frank and Sue, whom Frank always refers to as Princess.
It wasn't me, Daddy.
Oh, I know it wasn't, Princess.
Maureen is normally a sweet little girl, though she often does bad things and causes problematic events, being smart enough to hide it.
I don't want to be ladylike.
Yes, you do. That's why you're joining the Honeybee Scout.
Her closest friends are Kenny and Ben, and they get in all sorts of trouble. They play dangerous, unsanitary, and poorly thought out games together.
What do you want to do?
We found a rusty lawnmower in the woods.
When Bill has to babysit Maureen in the second episode of season 1, Maureen takes advantage of Bill and doesn't listen to his authority and takes him for a gullible schmuck, even calling him a wuss.
See you later, stupid.
Maureen also has no problem with the idea of blackmailing Bill with the threat of telling their parents that he was suspended.
Would you be so kind as to remove my tray from the table?
This tells us that Maureen is prone to manipulation and enjoys the idea of seeing her siblings getting in trouble with her parents.
Better do what I say or I tell Mom and Dad about your suspension.
Despite all that, Maureen still clearly cares for Bill when we see her saving him from the river in the season 3 finale by using her ring toss skills with a life preserver.
Look your wrist. Aim high. Don't trust the Jews.
Moving on to Julie. Julie is the textbook definition of a chronic hoarder, and she hoards cats, newspapers, and butter tubs.
You, Missy, have a lot to learn about customer satisfaction.
She is a huge Plastaware customer and is constantly ordering butter tubs. Julie is also a high-maintenance customer and gets on Sue's nerves. No wonder Vivian dumped Julie on Sue. She sounds nuts.
And I don't like the way this one's looking at me.
Moving along to Vivian Saunders, Vivian is Sue's boss at Plastaware, and in the beginning, Vivian shows little regard for Sue's availability or feelings and seems to be taking advantage of her.
Can you do that for me? Is it convenient for you? Thanks.
She also shows a dislike for Sue's children and children in general. She can be very cunning and manipulative, often forcing Sue into doing things that she'd rather not do, such as cuss at her coworkers or sell her priceless golden locket.
What's the holdup, Sue? I gotta get that money to Nico's tonight.
However, this is all done with good intentions, as it's to help Sue succeed in business in the long run. After a while, Vivian and Sue become best friends and quit working at Plastaware. Up next is Haircut Girl. Haircut Girl trades free haircuts for sexual favors.
Ready for your haircut?
We admire your hustle, Haircut Girl, but maybe you should find a profession that doesn't put other hardworking hair salons out of business. I don't think that Supercuts can keep up with a good deal like that.
That's alright. This thing happens to lots of guys.
Coming up next are Kenny and Ben. Kenny and Ben are brothers, and they seem to be heavily neglected as they're seen without their parents doing stupid and dangerous things throughout the show.
Tastes like Mama's gun.
They don't seem to be antagonists in the show, but they are a huge nuisance and constantly pressure Maureen and Bill to do stupid things, which puts their lives in danger.
If you die, can we eat you?
Up next is the circus roustabout and baggage handler, Phineas.
It's me, Phineas, from the circus, remember?
The circus was shut down because Phineas and his circus friends were cruel to the elephants. Phineas mentioned to Frank that he and the rest of the circus workers beat elephants with shovels.
We've been hitting elephants with shovels for years.
That's actually pretty dark. Despite Phineas's cruel nature to animals, he does manage to help Frank and the rest of the Airways employees by providing elephant tranquilizer to stop Scoop Dunbarton's reign of terror. Now we get to Win-Win, a Vietnamese immigrant who was taken during the Vietnam War to America by Chet Stevenson, where they got married and eventually moved into Frank's neighborhood.
Could you run home and roll out the barbecue and grab a bag of charcoal?
She is one of Sue's best friends, and she really loves American TV. Ranking her is tricky because she's a good person for the most part, but she poisons Chet's food, and Chet gets really sick and goes to the hospital.
I got tired of waiting and poured in the whole bottle.
It's good that she stands up for herself and defends herself against his abuse, but poisoning someone is a bit extreme and also a crime.
I innocent. No talk English good.
Up next is Babe. It's hinted that he's bisexual and has an unhealthy obsession with Vic, even though he's married to Marie.
We just kind of like him. For one thing, he smells great.
You can see Babe take pictures of Vic's crotch in season 3, and is really desperate to spend time with him.
Take me over the rainbow, Vic!
Despite invading Vic's privacy and almost being unfaithful to Marie, he loses interest in Vic and realizes that he has a good thing with her.
And I'll never think of Vic in the bedroom again.
Next is the groovy Vic Reynolds. Vic can be seen using drugs, oftentimes cocaine, which he uses to numb his anger and depression.
Forecast calls for snow.
Despite his hedonism, Vic is very jealous of Frank because Vic doesn't have a family of his own, and he tells Frank that he's a good father to his children.
I see you over there, cooking out, tossing the ball with the boys.
He's a good person for the most part and doesn't know that his girlfriend Cutie Pie is cheating on him with just about everybody in the neighborhood. When Vic finds out from Kevin that Cutie Pie had her way with him,
Gets worse. Turns out Cutie Pie was f***ing everybody. Dudes, chicks.
he gets really upset and starts shooting up his house, endangering everybody around him.
Everybody out!
Moving along to Greg Throater.
Oh, you've got a swimmer's body.
Greg is Ginny's gay ex-husband, and when they were together, Greg felt incredibly guilty over putting Ginny through a sham of a marriage and having 2 kids with her.
I'm a homosexual, Ginny! I've been living a lie.
He begs Ginny to divorce him, but Ginny is in complete denial over his sexuality.
Just divorce me, my darling!
No way, mister!
Greg cheats on Ginny with other men, and while Greg committed adultery, he needs to be happy too. After all, she ignored Greg's request for a divorce, and I don't think marriage counseling will resolve that issue.
Mister, I'm gonna shut you up.
Moving along to Corey Mars. Corey Mars is a teenage heartthrob known for his hit song, It's a Puppy Dog Cotton Candy Day. Unfortunately, like many singers, Corey has a drug addiction and gets arrested for drug possession.
That was not my jacket the cops found the illegal substance in.
Now on to Scott Ichikawa. Scott is Maureen's classmate and he hates school. He says he's not good at it and wants to do motocross instead.
I wanna ride motocross!
One day at school, Scott cheats on his math test by copying Maureen's answers, and it gets Maureen into trouble.
You didn't eat off him! Yes, you did!
Scott doesn't deny that Maureen cheated instead, and it takes him a long time to admit that he was in the wrong.
I cheated on Maureen! She's a genius!
A bit of a scummy thing to do. Moving along to Skee-Ball. Skee-Ball is one of Vic's friends.
He's a man, Frank. A man named Skee-Ball.
He is a cookie commercial star and a Christmas elf at the mall during Christmas time.
But the only job society lets him have is playing an elf at the mall.
Skee-Ball manages to sleep with Vic's girlfriend Cutie Pie and betrays his friendship. Skee-Ball, more like Skeezball. Despite hurting Vic's trust, he does help the Murphys in their Fitzsimmons skirmish. Moving on to Stan and Mrs. Chilson. Stan and Mrs. Chilson are Sue's parents. You'd think having grandparents would be nice, but no, not these guys. The Chilsons disapprove of Sue's choice in marrying Frank, and they let him know that all the time.
Well, Sue's always had to do things her way.
They hate Frank and constantly berate him, telling him that he can't support her or their kids, openly mocking Frank's smaller income compared to Stan's.
Not as nice as the Cadillac I would have bought her if she'd graduated from college.
Stan just wants what's best for his daughter and feels that Frank getting her pregnant before she finished college ruined her chances of becoming successful.
I know when we're not wanted.
Ha! If you knew that, you would have left 5 hours ago.
Next is Mrs. Vanderheim. Mrs. Vanderheim is a very confident woman and doesn't let her weight get her down. In fact, she seems to be getting many clients. She keeps getting arrested for offering her services though. Despite her lewd demeanor, she does deeply care for her son Quincy and keeps him in the dark about what she does for a living to protect his innocence.
I'm so proud of you, Quincy. My little computer man.
Up next is Hank Howland. Hank is a coke-addicted radio DJ who works with Vic. He thinks that Corey Marr's record is trash, but Vic convinces him to play it on the air by bribing him with cocaine.
I love this record.
In fact, all you need to do to get him to play your song is give him drugs and he'll do it. Not a very ethical man. Coming up next is Goomer. Goomer is one of the Murphys' neighbors and one of Frank's best friends. Goomer is a pretty creepy dude. He has a nasty obsession with stalking people in the neighborhood, including his friends.
That back bedroom window is always open. Just gotta stand in a bucket to reach it.
Goomer also spies on everybody's activities and has no problem looking at people through their window. Pervert alert. It's also mentioned in season 2 that Goomer also breaks into people's homes and knows way too much about their lives.
Yeah, this is getting good.
Moving along to Nicky, Nubber, and Moorhead. Nubber and his gang are Kevin's new friends after Kevin has a falling out with Bolo and Lex. They're basically delinquents and have no problem committing acts of vandalism and theft.
Put stuff on the tracks and watch the train squash it.
They may have a shady demeanor, but they can be nice when they want to be. On that note, we also have Bolo and Lex. Bolo and Lex are Kevin's friends and bandmates.
Get ready to rock.
They're stoners and have a tendency to break the law.
Oh man, I don't want to go to juvie. My mom is gonna kill me.
For instance, Bolo drives Lex and Kevin around in his mom's car, and he's only 14 years old.
14 and a half?
Plus, they enjoy petty vandalism. But more notably, they're not loyal friends and make fun of Kevin for having a panic attack.
Kevin's tripping.
They also kicked Kevin out of the band because he wasn't playing what they wanted to play.
We shouldn't be in a band with you anymore.
Rounding out the gray area, we have Claire. Claire is also one of Kevin's friends, and they also have romantic feelings for each other.
Touch it.
All right, but only over your pants.
Like Kevin's friends, she has no problem vandalizing private property and getting into trouble. When Kevin falls into a hole in the ice and cries for his dad to help him, Claire loses interest in him and sees him as a wuss and makes drowning jokes to Kevin.
There's water in the sink. You might drown in it.
Which is pretty harsh. And that's it for the gray area. Now we move into the worst of the worst, starting with the bad and ending with the most evil. First up in the bad category is Chuck Sawitsky. Chuck works at his father's electronics store, Sawitsky & Son, as a TV salesman. He's pretty cruel to Frank when he tried to return the broken TV.
I'll hold the door open for you, so you can carry it back to the car.
And he also hits on Doreen, the female employee. She certainly doesn't enjoy his attempts at flirting, but he continues anyway. When Kevin started working for him selling Christmas trees, Chuck left him all alone to sell trees and told him he wouldn't get any money unless he sold all the trees, and Chuck knew that there were 2 trees that were impossible to sell and was using that as a way to not pay Kevin.
You don't get paid till all the trees are sold.
What a cheapskate. Up next are Carl and Red, baggage handlers at the Airways. They are terrible at their jobs and they constantly steal from other people's suitcases, including things like prescription pills.
That's why they call it experimenting with drugs.
They also have no problem stealing cigarettes from the airport vending machine. They even gave Kevin one of the pills they stole from an elderly woman, which is dangerous because they have no idea what kind of drug they're taking.
You're a kid. You can only have one.
They also seem to have no regard for human life, as Carl and Red laugh at the video of their former boss getting decapitated by the propeller of an airplane.
Alive? Dead? Alive? Dead?
Which is pretty dark. Moving along to Jeffrey Dahmer and Officer Dahmer. Okay, we get it. The Jeffrey Dahmer character in the show is obviously based on the real Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, it can't be a coincidence, right? And we all know how the real Jeffrey Dahmer turned out. The Jeffrey Dahmer in the show is only 9 years old, and he's a terror. He constantly hurls insults at adults like the Murphys, and he attempts to graffiti an American flag. He also has no problem stealing Frank's lawn chair and getting into a physical fight with him. As for Officer Dahmer, well, he raised a complete menace, so enough said.
People like that need to be eliminated.
Up next is Nana Rose Bonfiglio. She is incredibly racist and believes that an entire ethnic group is ruining Hollywood. She's also mean and cynical to Marie, making fun of her weight. She also cheered on Philip on TV when he was beating up Hobo Jojo, and seems to be okay with violence towards others.
That
gypsy clown should be shot!
Next is Jim Jeffords. Jim Jeffords is a famous news reporter and television host. Jim is insensitive towards important social issues.
Not that you're going to be marrying my daughter or anything.
He also plays Hobo Jojo. He has a fetish towards pregnant women and hits on pregnant women in the audience, including Sue in the episode Frank the Father.
Do you have any home movies of the birth?
Jim also has no problem with cheating, as he prevents Maureen from winning the ring toss on purpose. Jim only did this because he took the toys from the boxes and gave them to his second family for Hanukkah.
I'm not the one who took all the toys out of the boxes.
Those prizes were meant for the winner of the ring toss, not for his private lice. What a skeezy thing to do.
Sorry, kids. Better luck next time.
Up next is Eugene Menard. Eugene is the vice principal of Alfred P. Southwick Elementary. He calls a private parent conference and asks Frank and Sue to come to school to discuss Maureen and her cheating on a math test.
So, obviously, Maureen cheated.
He thinks that Maureen cheated off of Scott, and the only reason he believes Scott and not Maureen is because Scott is an Asian boy, so he assumes he must be smarter.
An Oriental boy.
Oh, they're really smart.
Next is Vic's unfaithful girlfriend, Cutie Pie. Cutie Pie cheats on Vic with just about everybody, including Skee-Ball and Howlin' Hank. She even cheats with Kevin, who is underage.
I thought you were just short!
In this case, her actions are illegal. She takes advantage of Kevin's naive nature, inexperience, and state of arousal.
Stupid thing won't go away!
Moving along to Bob Pogo. Bob Pogo is Frank's overweight boss, who works at the Airways and rides on a mobility scooter. He's also very mean to his employees, a total glutton, and calls his baggage handlers donkeys. He also leaves angry messages on Frank's answering machine, and when he was instructed to fire Frank, he rubbed it in his face and was very smug about it.
You're done, Frank.
He's firing me? On Christmas?
He does try to be a little nicer as the series goes on, but overall, Bob Pogo is a pretty terrible human being.
Why did you leave me, Frank?
You fired me!
Up next is Mr. Durkin.
Mr. Durkin. And it rhymes with nothing.
Mr. Durkin is Kevin Murphy's summer school teacher. He is known for abusing his students anytime they misbehave, including throwing books at their heads. He's also known for making students, including Kevin, feel bad for not knowing math questions.
Solve for X.
Give me back my book. Solve for X.
What a jerk. Moving along to Dana, Jean, and Tracy McGrath. Dana, Jean, and Tracy are all Plastaware executives, and their work involves Tupperware. The three harass their female employees and make the workplace environment hostile and unsafe.
Ooh, look at me, I'm a girl.
I'm entitled to my own opinion.
They also make lewd comments to Sue and Vivian. Dana, Jean, and Tracy's unwelcomed advances affect Sue's work performance, and also affects her confidence to work in an environment where nobody takes her ideas seriously.
If I could throw in my 2 cents.
I'd like to throw my 2 cents in her.
Up next is Roger and Scoop Dunbarton. Roger Dunbarton was the CEO of the Airways that Frank works at.
I'm Roger Dunbarton, the CEO.
He was extremely rich and had a trophy wife named Brandy. Roger was a cruel individual who cared more about the cost of replacing the propeller that caused Ed's death, and less about Ed.
Do you know how much it costs to replace one of those propellers?
He was rude and dismissive to those he thought were beneath him, and he was rude to his wife, calling her fat when she really isn't.
I mean it. I'll cut you off!
He also didn't seem to care about the union strike and was unimpressed with how Frank handled the strike with compassion and asked Bob Pogo to fire him on Christmas Eve. Talk about a Scrooge moment. Roger asked his idiot nephew, Scoop Dunbarton, to take over Frank's job, and he was just as insufferable.
Get back to work! Oh, God!
Scoop was a minor league baseball player until he was kicked in the head by a horse and suffered permanent brain damage. So not a good replacement. And let's not gloss over the fact that he tried to resegregate baseball.
Resegregate now! It's what white God wants!
His lack of reasonable thought and reckless behavior endangered employees all over the airport. Roger and Scoop's reign of terror ends when terrorists invade the airport and a bomb goes off, killing both Roger and Scoop. Good riddance.
I think Dunbarton would have wanted us to take the rest of the day off.
On to Henrietta Van Horn. Henrietta is the founder of Plastaware and eventually became a millionaire and retiring to a mansion.
Admire my collection of antique monkey paws.
Her personality is similar to Roger Dunbarton, which means she's also awful. She had no problem stealing and taking credit for Sue's salad tosser idea.
God gave me the idea when my washing machine broke down.
She basically destroyed Sue's dream. What a vile person. As we get more and more into evil, we have International Touch.
Come with International Touch, you will be my queen.
International Touch is a local pimp who works around the shadier parts of town.
You boys looking for something? Something to make you feel good?
One of his girls is Mrs. Vanderheim, and he always bails her out of jail just to get her back on the street doing tricks. A mean boss and a scumbag who's constantly berating his employees.
Don't you mess with International Touch!
Moving along to Randy. Randy is Bill's paper route boss, and while he's nice to Bill, he has no problem hitting people with his truck, including Jimmy Fitzsimmons.
Oh man, not again.
Randy also has a drug dealing collection racket on the side and uses Bill as a drug mule, even though Bill has no idea and just thinks he's delivering papers.
Are you a cop?
You have to tell me if you're a cop!
Up next is Smokey Greenwood. Smokey is one of Rosie's good friends, and he's the owner and founder of the Champagne Chariot vending services. Despite getting Frank a job after he got fired from the airways,
Slide 'em in. Like you're making love to your woman.
Smokey is not a very nice person, as he traded his son to the circus for being too albino.
So we shunned him, sold him off to the circus.
Smokey has also spent some time in jail, but it isn't revealed why. But he's also shown to be sadistic, as he purposely pokes holes in condoms, which is really messed up. Now on to Bridget, Jimmy, and Mr. Fitzsimmons. Bridget is Jimmy's younger sister and Bill's former love interest. Like her brother, Bridget has a foul mouth and a foul attitude, and is really a chaotic psycho with a violent temper. Her father and her brother are afraid of her, and that's saying something. Bridget has no sympathy for injured human beings and can be seen laughing at an injured ice cream man. When Bill sends Bridget a breakup letter, Bridget makes Bill's life miserable and vandalizes his bike. She also puts fake letters in Bill's newspapers saying that he poops on their lawns, as he unknowingly tosses the papers to everybody's house, which almost costs him his job. Then she manipulated Bill into getting back together with her and convinces him to run away with her to Pittsburgh.
The only solution is for us to run away and be together.
But then she ditches him at the last minute and leaves him on a train all by himself. She also put nail polish in Jimmy's insulin, which caused him to go temporarily blind in his left eye.
Get out of here before I put nail polish in your insulin again.
Speaking of Jimmy, Jimmy is the neighborhood bully and constantly bullies Bill. Jimmy is really violent and likes to beat up Bill and other weak kids.
If you cross my path today, Murphy, I will scalp you.
Once he stuck a pencil in a milkman's leg because the milkman refused to give him heavy cream.
I'm here for sticking a pencil in the milkman's leg.
As for Mr. Fitzsimmons is a janitor of the town's elementary school, and he also drives the school bus. Like his son, he is generally rude and unempathetic and hits Jimmy with his belt when he misbehaves.
Yeah, it's never you! It's never you!
Mr. Fitzsimmons also purposely sprays a cleaning product into Philip's face to stop him from cheering on Bill. He has a personal beef with the Murphy family and can be seen fighting them from time to time.
Your whole family's crazy!
What a messed up family. Up next is Chet Stevenson. Chet is married to Win-Win and a colonel in the United States Air Force. He found an escape in the military after witnessing his dad drowning his own dog because it defecated in his shoes. That's rough, but don't feel too bad for the guy. Chet is a bad person and abuses his wife.
We're going home.
Yes, Mr. Chet.
Making sure that she remembers her place, emotionally toying with her, and verbally bashing her in the privacy of their home, while also isolating her from the other neighbors.
You don't mind, do you, sweetheart?
He also threatens to take away her television privileges. On second thought, we don't blame her for poisoning him. Finally, we're giving the gold medal of evil to two characters. They are Jefferson Davis and Danielle Carey. Jefferson Davis is the leader of the Black Liberation Alliance for Black Liberation and believes that violence is the only way to get justice.
The hijackers claim to be members of the Black Liberation Alliance for Black Liberation.
Jefferson and his group are responsible for kidnapping theater student Danielle Carey and radicalizing her, and making her commit acts of terrorism with them.
We have a bomb in this suitcase, and we will use it!
Jefferson Davis and Danielle Carey attempt to hijack a plane at the airways, and they were also indirectly responsible for the deaths of both Roger and Scoop Dunbarton, which makes them the most evil characters, but considering they only killed Roger and Scoop, I suppose it could have been way worse. And that's our ranking. Disagree with us? Put us through a wall and let us know in the comment section. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite shows, cartoons, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.